Hello there, slot car toy fans. This is Jim, and thanks again for taking the time to stop by my channel. Well, this happens to be part 2 of the maintenance on a slotless chassis. The ones that I use happen to be the Aurora AFX Speed Steer and the late model, which they call the Tyco CC-03 chassis. And I did part 1 video just explaining the difference between the two. So now what we're going to do is we're going to disassemble one of these. And then in part 3, I will show you how to get it tuned up and running really well. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take off the rear axles. Now, of course, the rear tires go without saying. If you don't have good tires, your car is not going to run well. But we're going to save that for part 2 of the part 3 of the video. So we'll snap this off here. And within this chassis happens to be clutch pins in these gears, and I've taken one out already, and there's a little hole right there for that clutch pin to go in. You can possibly see that clutch pin there. I'll show you what that looks like. So right here is the clutch pin, and I have not successfully manufactured one myself. It measures about 3/16 of an inch. And so the clutch pins that I have, I've tried to use a copper rod and whatnot. They are a real pain to get inside that hole. And as you can see me just trying to do this, and if you don't line things up properly, it can go flying across the room. And so it's now inserted in, and then what the inside of that looks like, here's the inside of that gear. You'll see that there is a stop, and so it slides along and then stops right there on the inside of that gear, and that prevents the axle from going completely all the way around. Now, once you get this off, then you're going to want to clean off all the extra hair that you may see with the that's gotten wrapped around the rear axle. You may even want to take some Dawn detergent and wash that with a toothbrush. Now you'll notice some tools that I've been using along the way. Some of these bent nose tweezers are really handy to have, as is a little screwdriver, which I'll show you here in just a minute. We'll zoom out just a bit. Okay, so we've got the rear axle there. Now the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this magnet clamp, this little brass magnet clamp. We're going to put that over here. These little magnetic tool caddies are really nice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just pop the armature out. Okay, pop the whole thing out. Now around the armature we happen to have two magnets. One is white and one is not. And so they're opposite, polarized. We'll take the magnets off, and now we have our armature. Now there are several pieces on this armature to disassemble and get cleaned up. One is the pinion gear, so we'll take that off. And then we have a rear bushing, which is exactly the same as the front bushing. Then we have the front worm gear. Now in the case of the Tyco, you have a little silicone disc, and then we have our bushing right here. Now you'll notice that the armature is very black right in this area. So this is going to take some polishing up. And that's something that what you can end up doing is just really taking some Brasso and a Q-tip and cleaning that up. So we're going to do that right now. This is what I use, just Brasso. You can get that at any store, a hardware store, or if a place like Walmart will have it. On the West Coast, we have what's called a Fred Meyer. So I'm going to take that Brasso and I'm going to polish that up. And so that gets rid of all that carbon scoring. It sounds like a Star Wars thing, huh? That shines that right up. And you want to get that nice and polished up. Try to stay away from using a Dremel wire wheel, as this is just thin copper and you don't want to wear through it. And so you get that polished up real nicely, then that should be good to go. We'll put that over there. Now the next thing to take apart are the brush holders and the brushes. And what I end up doing is shoving this all the way through. We have a brush holder, and there's 3 parts to this. So we have our carbon brushes, and that one looks like it could be due to be replaced. And then inside that are some springs. And now what you can do is you can take some rubbing alcohol and clean that out using a pipe cleaner. And then the other thing that I end up doing is also sanding down the front of that brush. Okay, so both of these are out. I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol on the pipe cleaner and shove that in as best I can, try to clean that out. Again, the brush holders, there are 2 different types of brush holders. One happens to have a flange on the very end of it, and then one happens to have a ridge in the middle. Now, this is my little tray, carrying case. That's not even the right term, of all my AFX parts. And so this right here is the type that I'm referring to that has a little split in the middle. So it seems like Aurora made 2 different types. And once you get into this, you'll discover that it's kind of nice to have something like this where you can have all your parts. So once we get that all cleaned out, one of the brushes looks like was missing, so that's okay. And you don't want to lose these springs. These brush springs have a tendency to go flying across the room. And if your car isn't running right, you'll see here that this, you'll see here that this brush is not real flush on the end. And it's also a little bit shorter than normal. Let me pull out a regular brush so you can see the difference between. So this one's, it's got a little bit of wear on it. It's not too bad. Oh, I might reuse that. What I'm going to end up doing is just filing that down. So this isn't rocket science here. You just take a nail file. You can get these at, again, same place, you know, Walmart, and file that down. Okay. There's a notched end, and that's the part that goes next to the screw. All right. So now the next part happens to be the front where the wheels attach to the kingpins, and just snap those out. And then we have our drag link here. Now a lot of hair gets stuck in here, and this is where having the screwdriver helps. So you pry that hub out, that pin. Okay, we'll see if we can't get that to work. Grr, that's going to be a real bugger. Okay. All right. It's got a little bit of a flange there, and so that's going to take more time than I have in this video to pop that off. But what you want to end up doing, here I'll show you an example here from the parts bin, is there are really 3 parts to this. So we have our pin, and we have our hub, and then we have the wheel itself. Just basically 3 parts. And so this slides into here like so, and then this piece, you'll see there's an extra flange on that end, slides into there. And hair ends up working its way into that. So once you get that disassembled, then you just put it all together, and it's really just a press fit. Now this other one happens to have the steering pin on it. We'll see if we can pop that one off. And again, the front tires, yeah, this one's going to come off nicely. Okay. Take some pliers here, pull that out. And so you'll see that this one happens to have a little wire pin sticking out. That's the guide pin. Now everything disassembled really nicely. And we have our 3 parts. There happens to be no hair around this, so I can just put it all back together. So I just slide that in, and then where the area where that little ridge is, that goes into there, and then I just press it back in together. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can use a pair of pliers to press that back in if you feel like you need to. Now, one of the things you want to test for is how much in play you have in that piece, and you don't want it too snug because you want the wheel to be able to turn, but you don't want it extremely loose either. So there's a little fine balance here. This is a bit tight, so I'll take the screwdriver, and there we go. So that looks pretty good. So once you get the hair cleaned out of your hubs, put those aside. Now the final part happens to be the pickup shoes. And so we have a left and a right, and you can see how they're notched out a little bit wider here. So you basically just pry that out. Now you want to be very careful not to lose your pickup shoe springs. These are quite expensive for how small they are. And that's basically it. Now what you want to do is to inspect your pickup shoes for grooves. And if you notice that there is a groove worn in here, then it's probably best to replace it. You can replate these if you choose by soldering on copper to them. And that does work out. It's time consuming, but it does the job. Now we'll take a look here at the copper ones produced by Tyco as opposed to the brass ones by Aurora. And the copper ones tend to wear a little bit better, and they have better continuity. And so you may want to replace your AFX Speedster ones with copper. Now, once you have the chassis disassembled, like so, you want to take it to the sink and use some Dawn detergent and clean things all up. And now we're going to head on to part 3 of the video.